Have you ever had one of those experiences on the road that just sticks with you? Something you can't quite explain? I've spent years traveling, crisscrossing the country, and I've seen my fair share of weirdness. But there's one story, one night, that stands out above all the rest. It's the story of the motel that vanished by morning. It all happened a few years back. I was on a long-haul drive from Nevada to Colorado, a route I'd taken a dozen times before. But this trip was different. A freak late spring blizzard had blown in out of nowhere, turning the highway into a sheet of ice. Visibility dropped to almost zero. It was late. I was exhausted, and frankly, I was getting scared. Iberia Hotel, ED, passed. For the last 50 miles had a glowing no vacancy sign. My GPS was useless, showing nothing but a blank expanse of wilderness. Just as I was about to pull over and try to sleep in my freezing car, I saw it. Through the swirling snow, a faint, flickering neon sign appeared on the side of the road. It read the Sleepy Hollow Motel. Below it, another sign blinked weakly. Vacancy. I've never felt such a wave of relief in my life. It was a miracle. The motel itself was vintage. That's the polite way to put it. It looked like it had been plucked right out of a 1950s postcard. A single-story building with a long porch, faded paint, and those old-school individual doors for each room. It was eerily quiet, the only sound being the howling wind and the crunch of my boots on the fresh snow as I walked to the office. The lobby was just as strange. It was warm, impeccably clean, but completely frozen in time. There was a rotary phone on the counter, an old-fashioned cash register, and walls lined with black and white photos of landscapes I didn't recognize. Behind the desk stood an old man. He had kind eyes, a neatly trimmed white beard, and wore a starched shirt with a bolo tie. He didn't seem surprised to see me, just gave me a slow, warm smile. "Nasty night out there," he said, his voice calm and steady. Figured someone would be needing a room. I explained my situation, and he just nodded, like he'd heard it all before. He didn't ask for a credit card, just cash, $30. For the night, I handed him the bills, and he gave me a heavy, old-fashioned brass key with the number 7 etched into it. "Room 7. End of the hall," he said. "Get some rest. The storm will pass by morning." His certainty was comforting. There was no paperwork, no ID check, nothing. It was the simplest check-in I've ever had. As I turned to leave, he added, "The coffee's on at sunrise." My room was just like the lobby. Simple, clean, and old-fashioned. A sturdy wooden bed with a handmade quilt, a solid oak desk, and a single armchair. There was no TV, no phone, no Wi-Fi. It was strangely peaceful. The bed was surprisingly comfortable, and despite the wind rattling the windows, I fell asleep faster than I have in years. It was a deep, dreamless sleep, the kind you only get when you're completely and utterly exhausted. The next morning, I woke up to bright sunlight streaming through the window. The storm had vanished, just as the old man predicted. The world outside was covered in a pristine blanket of fresh snow. I felt amazing, more rested than I had in months. Remembering his offer of coffee, I got dressed and headed back to the lobby. But when I opened my door, I stopped dead in my tracks. Everything was wrong. The long, single-story motel building was gone. The porch, the other doors, the office, all of it. I was standing in front of a crumbling, burnt-out ruin. The structure was clearly ancient, with scorched timbers and a collapsed roof. It looked like it had been abandoned for decades, maybe even half a century. Weeds and small trees were growing up through the floorboards. Ispunaran, thinking I must be confused, dreaming something. But my car was right where I'd parked it, covered in a light dusting of snow. The tire tracks leading from the highway to my parking spot were still there, clear as day. My footprints from the car to the ruin were also there. But there was no motel, no office, no neon sign, just a charred, skeletal frame of a building. My heart was pounding. I walked over to where the office should have been. There was nothing but debris and shattered glass, all covered in a thick layer of dust and decay that the overnight snow couldn't hide. It was impossible. I'd been inside. I had talked to the old man. I had slept in a warm, clean bed. My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation. Did I dream the whole thing? Did I just pull over and sleep in my car and have an incredibly vivid hallucination? But then I felt something in my pocket. I reached in and pulled out the key. It was heavy and real in my hand, a solid brass key with the number 7. I looked at the spot where my room 7, should have been. There was just a gaping, burnt-out doorway leading to nowhere. The ground was littered with charred wood and rubble. This place hadn't been habitable in a lifetime. Shaken, I got in my car and drove. I didn't look back. About 20 miles down the road, I pulled into a gas station in the first real town I came to. I needed coffee, and I needed to talk to a human being to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. The cashier was a friendly woman who looked like she'd lived there her whole life while she was ringing me up. I worked up the courage to ask. "Hey, this is a weird question," I started. "But do you know anything about an old motel back on the highway? The Sleepy Hollow Motel." Her smile faded. She looked at me, really looked at me, for a long moment. "The Sleepy Hollow," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Son, there hasn't been a motel by that name out there for 60 years. It burned to the ground in a terrible fire back in the 50s. Took the old owner with it. A real tragedy." My blood ran cold. I must have looked like I'd seen a ghost, because she asked if I was okay. He just nodded, paid for my coffee, and walked out in a daze. To this day, I have no explanation. Was it a ghost? A trick of the mind brought on by exhaustion and the storm? Some kind of time slip? All I know is that I spent the night in a warm, safe room when I should have been freezing in my car. I met a kind old man who gave me shelter from the storm, and I still have the key. I keep it on my desk as a reminder that the world is a much stranger place than we think. That sometimes, when you're lost in the storm, help comes from the most unexpected and unexplainable places. So, what do you think? Have you ever experienced anything like this on a lonely road late at night? Let me know your own strange travel stories in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. Thanks for listening. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more Tales from the Road. Stay safe. Out late one night, I was hauling a load of lumber down a forgotten stretch of I-80 in Wyoming. The kind of road that makes you feel like the last person on earth. My only company was the hum of my engine and the occasional crackle from the CB radio, tuned to the trucker's lifeline. CHANNEL 19. It was dead silent, which was weird. Usually, there's at least some chatter. Guys swapping stories or warning about speed traps. But tonight, nothing. Just pure, empty static. Around 2 a.m., a different kind of sound cut through the hiss. It was faint at first, like a whisper buried deep in the noise. I fiddled with the squelch, trying to clear it up. The voice was distorted, broken up. It sounded like a child, a little girl. She was singing a nursery rhyme, something I couldn't quite place. It would come and go, swallowed by the static, 10 RPR a little clearer each time. I called out, "Hey, someone on this channel got a kid in the cab. It's way past their bedtime." No response. "Just a singing an hour passed." The landscape outside was a pitch-black void. The singing started to get strange. The melody was the same, but the words were wrong. They were jumbled, nonsensical, almost like she was speaking in reverse. A cold dread started creeping up my spine. This wasn't a prank. It felt different. It felt old. I tried changing the channel, but the singing followed me. 18, 20, 21. It was on every single one. Just that little girl's voice, now laced with a giggling sound that made the hairs on my arms stand up. I grabbed the mic again, my hand shaking. "This isn't funny. Who is this?" The singing stopped. The radio went completely silent for a long moment. Then, a new voice came through, crystal clear, as if someone was sitting right next to me in the passenger seat. It was a man's voice, low and raspy. He said just one thing. "She just wants to play." And then, the little girl's voice was back. But this time it wasn't singing. It was a scream, a terrible, piercing scream that filled the cab. So loud it felt like the windows would shatter. I slammed on the brakes, the whole rig groaning as it skidded to a stop on the empty highway. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I ripped the power cord for the CB right out of the console. The cab fell into an unnerving silence, broken only by my own ragged breathing. I looked out into the darkness, half expecting to see something. Anything. There was nothing. Just the endless road and the Wyoming plains. But then I looked in my passenger side mirror. For just a split second, illuminated by my taillights, I saw her, a small figure standing on the shoulder. Her face was a pale blur, but I could see she was waving. I didn't wait. I stomped on the gas and didn't look back. I drove with no radio all the way to Salt Lake City, the silence somehow louder than the screaming had been. I sold my rig a week later. I couldn't get back in that cab. To this day, I don't know what happened on that highway, but sometimes, when it's quiet, I can still hear the static, and in the static, I can hear a little girl singing. Some truckers say Channel 19 is haunted by ghosts of the road. I don't know if I believe in ghosts, but I know what I heard, and I know I'm never driving that stretch of I-80 at night again. Thanks for listening to my story. If you've got your own creepy tailies from the road, drop them in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Stay safe out there. Have you ever been driving late at night, down a long, empty stretch of road, and felt that weird prickle on the back of your neck? That feeling like you're not entirely alone, even when the highway is deserted for miles in every direction? Well, tonight, we're diving deep into that feeling. We're talking about chillin' highway stories, the kind that make you check your rearview mirror one more time. And I've got a personal one for you, from a trip that still gives me goosebumps just thinking about it. So, a few years back, I was on a road trip, cutting across the country. My route took me through one of those classic American desert landscapes, endless stretches of asphalt shimmering in the heat, giant cacti standing like silent sentinels, and a sky so big it feels like it could swallow you whole. It was beautiful, but as day turned to night, it became unsettling. I was driving through Nevada, somewhere between two tiny towns that were barely dots on the map. My GPS had lost its signal hours ago, but the road was straight, so I wasn't too worried. It was who's me in my car, and the vast, dark desert. The moon was just a sliver, so the only light came from my headlights, cutting a narrow path through the oppressive darkness. I had my music on, trying to keep myself awake, but the silence between songs was deafening. It's a different kind of quiet out there. It's so profound it feels heavy, like it's pressing in on the car. That's when I first saw it, up ahead, in the far distance. A single light. It was stationary, just hovering off the side of the road. It was too bright to be a reflector and too low to be a star. My first thought was maybe it was a ranch house, or someone had pulled over. But as I got closer, the light just vanished. Poof. Gone. I slowed down as I passed the spot where I thought I'd seen it. Nothing. Just sand, scrub brush, and the dark. I shook my head, blamed it on fatigue, and kept driving. I strain, right? The mind plays tricks on you when you're tired. About 20 minutes later, it happened again. This time, the light was closer. It appeared suddenly, a brilliant white orb, maybe 100 yards ahead, just off the shoulder. It was pulsating gently, like a slow heartbeat. This time, I knew I wasn't imagining it. My heart started pounding. I took my foot off the gas, my car slowing down almost on its own. I was staring at this thing, trying to make sense of it. It wasn't a drone. It wasn't a car. It was just a silent, floating light in the middle of nowhere. And then, just as before, it blinked out of existence. Okay, now I was officially spooked. My brain was racing through every possible explanation. A weather balloon, some kind of military test, a prank. None of it felt right. The silence was the most unnerving part. There was no hum, no engine noise, nothing. Just this impossible light, appearing and disappearing. I decided to just floor it. I wasn't going to stick around to see what happened next. My goal was the next town, no matter how far away it was. I cranked up the music as loud as it would go, trying to drown out my own panicked thoughts. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel. I focused on the road ahead, refusing to look into the darkness on either side. For a while, it seemed to work. The miles ticked by, and nothing else happened. I started to relax a little, telling myself it was just a weird desert phenomenon. They say strange things happen out there, right? Desert lights, mirages. But the desert wasn't done with me yet. As I crested a small hill, my headlights swept across something in the middle of the road. I slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching in protests. My car skidded to a halt just a few feet away from a single, empty rocking chair. I just sat there, engine idling, headlights illuminating this completely out-of-place object. An old wooden rocking chair, sitting perfectly upright in the dead center of the highway. It looked ancient, the wood weathered and gray. It wasn't moving, just sitting there silently. Who would leave a rocking chair in the middle of a remote desert highway? Where did it even come from? There were no houses, no turnoffs, nothing for miles. My mind went into overdrive. Was this a trap? Was someone hiding in the dark, waiting for a driver to stop? I locked my doors, my hand hovering over the gear shift. Every horror movie scenario I'd ever seen flashed through my head. I peered into the darkness beyond my headlights, but I couldn't see anything. Just the endless, empty desert. And then it started to rock. Slowly. Back and forth. Fall with a gentle rhythmic creak that I could just barely hear over my own engine and my heart hammering against my ribs. There was no wind. The air was perfectly still, yet this chair was rocking on its own. That was it. That was my limit. I didn't even think. I yanked the steering wheel hard, swerved around the chair, and stomped on the gas pedal. I didn't look in my rearview mirror. I couldn't. I was terrified of what I might see. Would the chair be gone? Would there be someone sitting in it? I didn't want to know. Just drove. I drove faster than I probably should have, my eyes glued to the road ahead, praying for the first sign of civilization. It felt like an eternity, but eventually, I saw the faint glow of city lights on the horizon. It was the most beautiful sight I have ever seen. As I drove into the small town, with its streetlights and 24-hour gas station, I felt like I could finally breathe again. I pulled into the gas station, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn off the ignition. I just sat there for a few minutes, trying to calm my racing heart. I've told this story a few times, and people always try to explain it away. The lights were swamp gas or reflections. The rocking chair fell off a truck, and the vibrations from my engine made a rock. Maybe. But out there, in that vast, silent darkness, it felt like something else entirely. It felt ancient and strange, like I'd stumbled into a place where the rules of the normal world didn't apply. The desert holds a lot of secrets. People have been crossing these landscapes for centuries, and many of those journeys have ended out there in the sand. It makes you wonder what kind of energy, what kind of stories get left behind. Was it a prank, a ghost, a warning? I'll never know for sure, but I do know one thing. I have a newfound respect for those long, empty stretches of road, and I always make sure my gas tank is full before I head into the dark. What about you? Have you ever seen something on a lonely road that you just can't explain? A strange light, an odd figure, a feeling that sent a shiver down your spine. I'd love to hear about it. Drop your own chillin' highway stories in the comments below. Let's share our experiences and maybe feel a little less alone in our spooky encounters. Thanks so much for hanging out and listening to my story. If you enjoyed this and want to hear more tales from the strange side of life, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next video. Stay safe out there on the roads, and maybe keep a little extra light on. Until next time.